To see the version of PowerShell that is running on the machine, the command is called get-host, all one word, all lowercase, no spaces, and press enter. The version information is on the second line of output, and the first two numbers there are the ones we are really interested in. In my example machine, it's version 5.1, which is fine for our course. If you have a higher version than 5.1, but it still starts with 5, that is fine for this course. So the get host command is the one that allows us to see the version information. When we run a command like that in PowerShell, it actually builds an object in memory, which is quite different from how Bash does things. And then it displays the content of the object. The data content that we see on the screen includes the information about version and several other items as properties. This is a term you'll hear over and over and over in PowerShell, and describes data items contained within objects that we can access and see and sometimes change. When you run the get host command, if your version of PowerShell comes up as version 2, 3, or 4, you need to visit the Microsoft Docs website. There is a link on the course GitHub page here to go to that site and get the instructions for upgrading to the latest version of Windows PowerShell, Major version 5. It is required for this course. We do not need PowerShell 6 for this course. If you want to install it, you certainly can. It will not interfere with Windows PowerShell 5, and it would give you the opportunity to play with the two different versions to see any differences. If you try a command in PowerShell 5 and want to know if it works in PowerShell 6, you can certainly try it in the other window and see. The other thing that we need to make sure is set up on our system is some kind of backup for our work, some place to keep our scripts. In this course, we set up a GitHub repository and account for our Bash files. I urge you to use that for your PowerShell files as well. When you go to do this, you will already have the Bash repository. The repository itself will actually be a course repository with a Bash folder in it. And what we'll do is go ahead and create another folder to hold the PowerShell files. In a Windows environment, you're already working in a graphical user interface. I would suggest that the best way to do this is go to desktop.github.com and download the graphical user interface tool for Windows, which gives you a simplified way to download and access your files. In Linux, in order to use our scripts and edit them, we downloaded a tool called Atom and added some syntax checking tools into it. We do not need to do that for PowerShell. You can if you wish, but there's no big advantage. PowerShell for Windows includes those tools with it. Once you have installed the GitHub desktop tool, you can use that tool to go ahead and connect to repositories, to get a repository list with files that you have, and use the button to pull or push files as needed. If you need to, you'll see information saying it needs to happen. If your version is up to date on your local machine, it will simply tell you you can fetch the origin if you wish. There's no changes. As you add files to your repository or change them on the local machine, they'll show up in a list on the left, And you can still put in your commit comment and do the commit to master, and it'll give you the option to push the files, just like we did with our bash scripts in Linux. If you do not choose to use GitHub, you will not lose any marks. But if you have an issue with your laptop and lose access to your scripts, there will be no consideration given for extensions to deadlines on work for this course, because you should be keeping your files on GitHub and updating them whenever you make changes. So you will always be able to show your work on the deadline from GitHub, even if your dog eats your laptop or your bus runs it over. Enough about GitHub. Use it. If you wish to install PowerShell Core, following the documents links will take you to the docs site, which gives you instructions. If you want to install this and you've got an older version of Windows, you'll find that there's a fair bit of work to do. Don't let that put you off. You can go ahead and do that. If you have a Mac, you can install PowerShell Core on Mac OS. There's a link on the left here. And it allows you to play with PowerShell on Mac OS. It is not released on the Apple App Store, so you actually need to install a software management tool called Homebrew on your Mac. You may already have this tool. If you do, you don't need to reinstall it. It's just the software that allows you to install packages. As long as you have Homebrew installed, you can then install PowerShell and run it. If you're going to run PowerShell Core version 6, whether it's Windows or Mac OS, or even if you choose to run it on Linux, the reason it doesn't interfere with PowerShell 5 is they renamed the command for PowerShell 6, and the command is simply pwsh, not the whole word PowerShell. In terms of making a place to put your PowerShell files on GitHub, your repository currently will have a README and a bash folder. When we go to create our first file, we can do it right on the GitHub website, or we can do it under Windows and then use the GitHub desktop tool to push it up. That's all we need to do as a setup. The next video will get us started on our first PowerShell lesson.